Maki is an ugly-ass loner with absolutely no social life. The kind of guy who talks to his houseplants and they still don't respond. His idea of a wild Friday night was watching anime alone and pretending he chose this lifestyle. But all of that changed when the second prettiest Baddie in his class started pulling up every Friday for Netflix and chill at his place. And let's just say, they weren't watching Netflix. They did a ton of naughty things. The kind of things Maki used to only see in his browser history. Don't act like you don't have one either, you non-subscribing losers. One morning, Maki walks past a group of girls huddled together, gossiping the way only they can. Loud enough for everyone to hear, but acting like it's a secret. They were roasting boys they'd been with, how pathetic they were, how they couldn't stay hard, how one guy apparently cried after. Brutal, cold, honest. Maki kept walking, minding his business like the socially invisible man he was trained to be. Then, his phone buzzed. A WhatsApp message. From Umi, one of the baddies standing right there in that very group. She was suggesting they hang out at his place after school, Netflix and chill. He looked up slowly. She was already looking at him, smiling. Maki put his phone in his pocket and walked away like nothing happened. But on the inside, that man was doing backflips and a full gospel choir performance. Some months ago, it was the beginning of a new school term. Maki had a personal theory that springtime was the greatest term of them all. Not because of the weather, not because of the fresh start, but because statistically speaking, spring was when the most cheeks got clapped. He'd done the research, don't ask how. The classroom buzzed with students chattering and catching up, until the homeroom teacher walked in and silenced the room just by existing. She introduced herself as Ms. Sophie Cameltoe, and yes, that was her real name, and no, nobody was mature enough to let it slide. Miss Sophie powered through like a professional. She gave a brief bio of herself before handing everyone a blank sheet of paper and asking them to write about themselves. When everyone finished, she decided the most chaotic way to pick who goes first was a rousing round of eeny, meeny, meeny, mo. And if you couldn't see it coming from a mile away, Maki got picked. He panicked internally, genuinely questioning whether some witch had placed a generational curse on him, specifically designed to make him go first in class introductions. Miss Sophie glanced at his paper and raised an eyebrow. She noted he'd transferred from a middle school in Tokyo, and they were currently in Kyoto. She assumed he wasn't from around here. He confirmed it, telling the class he used to live where Ken Kaneki once terrorized the streets, but relocated to this painfully boring town last December due to family issues. The two most loaded words in the Japanese language. Moving on, Sophie squinted at his hobbies section. Gaming, fine, normal. Then, pulling meme coin scams. She stared at the paper, then at him, then back at the paper. She decided to move on. She noticed he'd left several sections completely blank and asked if he didn't do anything on weekends. Maki denied it immediately, rattling off the most aggressively average teenager activities known to man. Pizza, sugary drinks. He did it every Friday at home, he said. When his mom was out collecting milk, the class fell silent. Several students exchanged glances, their faces twisted in an expression that collectively said, "What godforsaken alternate universe did this guy crawl out of?" Sophie pressed forward and asked about anime since he'd listed it as a hobby, asking what genre he was into. Maki answered with the confidence of a man who has absolutely nothing to lose, citing Redo of Healer and Testament of the Sister's New Devil as his go-to genres. Sophie blinked, clicked her pen, smiled tightly, and moved on to the next student faster than she'd moved on from anything in her entire career. That next student was Yu, a baddie from Texas who walked up like the floor owed her money. Unlike Maki's turn, every single pair of eyes in that room snapped to attention the moment Yu opened her mouth. She introduced herself with the kind of effortless confidence that made people feel underdressed just for existing near her. Sophie praised her warmly, pointing out her hair specifically, telling her that every girl in the world must envy her for it. Yu accepted the compliment like she'd heard it 1,000 times. Because she had. On her portfolio, Sophie noticed she'd attended Tachibana Girls Middle School and asked if it was an all-girls school. Yu confirmed it, explaining flatly that she got tired of the lesbian energy and decided to enroll in a co-ed school. She glanced sideways at her friend Omi as she said it, casually massaging her face like she had somewhere better to be. Yu nudged Omi to go next. Sophie agreed. Umi stood up, introduced herself, and mentioned she'd attended the same middle school as Yu and somehow had ended up at the same high school again. She paused, then with a completely straight face, told the class she was sick of Yu, the way people are sick of unskippable YouTube ads, and requested that everyone look after her while she searched for a boyfriend. Yu told her to quit treating her like some washed-up old fart before she caught hands. Meanwhile, in the back of the class, 2 certified simps whispered that their homeroom might genuinely be the greatest class in the school. Deep analysis. Truly, Maki sat there and quietly accepted his fate. This class would revolve around Umi and Yu all year. He was basically an NPC and he knew it. As the school days piled up, Umi and Yu added a new friend to their social circle every other minute, while Maki ate lunch alone, replaying his catastrophic introduction on a loop. Because, really, who willingly befriends a guy whose listed hobbies include running meme coin scams? After school, students flooded out in groups. Maki watched them go. He'd been born into a one-friend household. That friend was his mom, and before anyone felt too sorry for him, he acknowledged openly that he did not want to die alone. But for now, he was getting by just fine without any damn friends. Probably. Maybe. The next school day, Yu arrived and celebrated surviving an entire week of high school without a cardiac event from simp activity. She threw herself dramatically onto Ume's desk and attempted to force her way into her rice cakes. Umi pulled back and told her she'd sooner pet a wild red panda. Across the room, the simp committee was already clocked in. One of them, gazing at Yu with the 1,000-yard stare of a man who had completely given up, whispered that her smile alone could carry him through any soul-crushing day. The other simp suggested they invite the girls to karaoke. The audacity was immaculate. Yu leaned over and asked Umi if she had any plans for the weekend. Umi confirmed she was planning to watch Spider-Man Brand New Day. Yu blinked, asked if she was living under a rock, then asked completely seriously whether it was a romance or action film, and immediately requested to join. Umi pulled out her phone and showed her the trailer. Yu's cinematic comfort zone was firmly in the 50 Shades of Grey territory, the kind of movies where the plot is technically there but nobody's watching for it. But committed to the bit, she plastered on a smile and claimed it looked awesome, asking if it was on Amazon Prime. Umi told her no. Just then, they walked past Maki's desk as he stood up, and he caught the tail end of their movie conversation. He muttered quietly that he saw absolutely nothing weird about Ume's taste in films. Nobody heard him, as usual. On his way home, Maki passed a physical movie rental store, still standing somehow in the age of streaming, and decided to step inside. He browsed for a minute before something caught his eye. A Minecraft movie. He picked it up, turned it over, and stared at it the way a man stares at gas station sushi. He placed it back on the shelf. New movies just didn't hit the same as the early 2000s ones. He reached for a classic instead, and immediately bumped straight into Umi. He apologized instantly. She scolded him instead, calling him a meanie for not noticing she'd been standing right beside him without so much as a hello. He stuttered, opening his mouth and producing something in the general direction of words. She took the lead. She pointed out that despite being in the same class for weeks, this was technically their first one-on-one conversation. Maki responded by asking if she didn't have plans today, essentially announcing he'd been eavesdropping on her earlier conversation like a cafeteria spy. Umi clocked it immediately, called him a rude boy that even Rihanna would dump before Rocky got the chance. He apologized sincerely. She laughed it off, then pointed at him and said, quite calmly, that she had another goal today besides renting movies. That goal was talking to him. Maki's jaw did things his face wasn't prepared for. She pulled out an introduction sheet, filled with the exact same hobbies as his. She explained she hadn't written it during class introductions but had done it afterward, because something about his chaotic self-presentation had genuinely intrigued her. She tucked it away and asked for movie recommendations. He landed on one of his favorites, Piranha Shark. She found the title ridiculous. He explained the name was designed to sound innovative and out of the box. She laughed. Piranha Shark reminded her of Kung Fu Shark, which Maki recognized immediately, but suggested she watch Kung Fu Panda instead, just to be safe. And from that moment, the two became friends. Which brings us back to the present. Umi was already at his place, pulling out a bottle of Pepsi large enough to be mistaken for a weapon, along with chips, asking what he'd ordered. Pizza, he said. He listed the toppings one by one. She said each one along with him, perfectly in sync, like a wife who had been studying her husband for years and was ready for the exam. When Little Caesars arrived, they made a toast, Pepsi instead of wine, celebrating the completion of another week, like the sophisticated degenerates they were. Umi demanded to know which game they were playing today. She assumed GTA San Andreas, same as last time. He shook his head and produced Red Dead Redemption from under his mattress. She cracked her knuckles and told him to bring it on. He reminded her calmly that since they'd started playing together, she had yet to win a single game. They played until sundown, at which point Umi was still a loser, ready to stamp the floor in pure, unfiltered rage. Maki stopped her, gently informed her that stamping would disturb the neighbor below, and disturbed neighbors meant disturbed police. She demanded one more game. He agreed, knowing in his heart that only Shiru and Sora from No Game No Life had any business challenging him. They played until they both looked up and realized it was fully dark outside. Game night, officially over. Maki started cleaning. Umi offered to help. He declined, pointing out that washing 2 glasses was an activity even a moderately alert baby could handle. So she started on the floor instead. Getting into a position so aggressively perfect, it activated some ancient part of Maki's brain that he really needed to keep offline. She caught him, called him a thirsty goat with no hesitation. He denied everything, pivoting to the reasonable inquiry of how she maintained an Instagram model physique while consuming more fast food than a rich kid whose only kitchen skill is boiling water. "Exercise," she said, then poked his stomach and started tickling him as official punishment for beating her at every game like a menace. He walked her out afterward. She recapped the evening, pointing out it had been their 3rd hangout, and admitted that when they first started talking, she genuinely hadn't thought they'd get along without things going sideways. He said they got along because they had the same taste in life. She called him weird for it. He said it wasn't as weird as inviting a girl to your place specifically to stare at her. He denied staring, said his mind had been on God every single second. She didn't believe a word of it, and told him they were going out next week before turning to leave. He stopped her, asked very carefully whether going out meant going into the city or going out with him as her boyfriend. She laughed so hard she almost choked, called him a silly ass, said she meant exploring the city. Regular teenager stuff. He asked if it would just be the 2 of them. She confirmed it, adding that the whole point was to coach him on how to survive in the actual world and interact with human beings. Maybe even meet some high school DxD tier baddies along the way. Later that night when his mom came home, Maki told her he'd be going out with a friend next week. She nearly passed out. In the entire time she had carried, birthed, and raised this boy, he had accumulated exactly 0 friends. He asked for extra money for the outing. She immediately assumed he was being extorted, refused. He spent the next several minutes convincing her this was a real friend, a physical, non-imaginary, actually existing human being. She lit up completely, handed him enough money for the trip, with enough left over for an anime DVD. She was that happy. The next day at school, he walked in on the girls talking about some Twitch stream Umi had missed and was apologizing for like she'd let the whole group down. Umi caught Maki's eye across the room and gave him a quiet signal to come over. He stayed seated, because he was a shy, anxious disaster and that was simply his brand. At lunch, he texted her instead. She immediately asked if he got the money. He confirmed it. She responded that she was glad he'd be treating her. He shut that down with the speed of a man who has done basic math. They were splitting 50-50. He was completely right is the point. He pocketed his phone and sat quietly, wondering if he was being a good friend to Umi. Then he heard voices nearby. He looked up and realized it was a guy walking up to Umi, clearly gearing up for a confession. Not wanting to witness this, Maki started packing up to disappear. He turned around and walked directly into Yu and another girl. Yu recognized him instantly. The other girl asked Yu if she actually knew this dork. Yu confirmed it. Same class. Then they told Maki, with great urgency, to move aside so they could eavesdrop on Umi's confession properly. The 3 of them stacked themselves into the most ridiculous surveillance formation known to humanity, just in time to hear the boy ask Umi to be his girlfriend. Umi rejected him. Clean. Efficient. No hesitation. Yu grabbed the other girl. They stared at each other in quiet devastation, a silent acknowledgement that they had witnessed an NPC get absolutely denied in real time. Maki said nothing, just watched. And somewhere in the back of his mind, filed this information away for absolutely no reason whatsoever.